Thank you for listening to Scandinavian Crimes Podcast. Be sure to check out the episode links and be part of our other social media platforms where you can leave a topic suggestion or even share some of your insights regarding the subject matter of the episode. We will always do our best to provide a well-researched episode, but sometimes due to limited access to information and translation issues, some information can be lost. It is therefore good to do your own research and get a deeper understanding of a case of your own interest. So with that all said, let us start today's episode.
Welcome to Scandinavian Crimes. My name is Devante, and say hello to my lovely co-host, Delila.
Hi.
And on this podcast, we will cover famous Scandinavian criminals who made their mark throughout Scandinavian history. So this Swedish case is involving breatharian parents and a sick child that gained significant attention and sparked very huge and massive widespread concern. The incident unfolded in 2016 when a couple who identified themselves as Breatharians were accused of neglecting their infant child's health and well-being. The child's health rapidly deteriorated, and a 4-month-old baby was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and was nearly close to death. The child was admitted to the hospital where medical professionals expressed grave concerns about the infant's condition. Authorities intervened and removed the child from the parent's custody, placing the infant under the care of medical professionals and social services. The parents faced criminal charges of gross bodily harm and endangerment as their adherence to Breatharianism had resulted in severe harm to their child's health. Now, I classified this, case as a religious fanatic situation in the title as well as in the story because the case has more of a spiritual aspect to it in terms of the beliefs of the two parents involved in the story. So with all that said, grab your favorite snacks, your drinks, and let's discuss the story of the religious fanatics, the Breatharians. On February 15th, 2019, 18-month-old Michelle was brought to the Children's Hospital in Sweden. The nurses quickly realized that she was in critical condition and called for immediate medical attention. Dr. Carol examined Michelle but was unable to establish any verbal contact or detect the cause of her breathing difficulties. Michelle showed no signs of reacting to pain during the stimulation test, indicating a lack of consciousness. Carol questioned Michelle's father, Henry, who had explained that the family had been sick with the stomach flu, but Michelle's condition had worsened while her parents had recovered. Carol also asked Michelle's growth curve, a measurement of her development, which is typically monitored at the Child Welfare Center through regular health checkups. Henry revealed that Michelle had never been to the BVC or received any health checkups. Checkups at the BVC in Sweden are not mandatory technically, but if parents choose not to attend, it must be reported to social services. This is because the Swedish government has a responsibility to ensure that all children receive the appropriate health care. Carol and the doctor attending to Michelle questioned Henry about her diet, which consisted of breastfeeding and some basic food. However, Carol was more focused on assessing Michelle's deteriorating condition. Blood tests revealed dangerously low blood sugar levels, and fluids were administered through an intravenous drip. Antibiotics were given as a precautionary measure, although Henry expressed disapproval of their use. Medication was administered to raise the pH level, and Michelle was moved into the intensive care unit for x-rays. Henry then insisted that no further treatment be given without his or his wife Jessica's approval. Once Michelle was in the ICU, she was under the care of a senior doctor named Rob. He noted that Michelle was in a deep state of unconsciousness and did not respond to any pain stimulation. Rob also observed a level of acidity in Michelle's blood that could not be attributed to a typical case of the stomach flu, even if she had been sick for 5 days as her father claimed. Additionally, Michelle was significantly underweight for her age, weighing only 6.3 kilograms at 18 months old, while the average weight of the child of that age is typically between 10 to 12 kilograms. Rob was greatly concerned about her well-being. Further tests were conducted, revealing that Michelle's blood count was at 59 instead of the expected range of 110 to 120. She had also dangerously low levels of vitamin K, D, B, as well as iron. Her iron level was so low that it was the lowest detectable level that the doctors had ever seen, suggesting it may have been even lower than the test results indicated. The deficiency of vitamin B12, which takes time to drop to the levels observed in Michelle's body, can cause irreversible damage to the nerve development in the bone marrow. According to Rob, Michelle's condition was not a result of a simple case of a stomach flu. It had been ongoing for a much longer period, leaving Michelle severely malnourished and just hours away from death. The doctors needed to provide Michelle with the necessary nutrients her body had been deprived of to keeping her alive. However, this practice was also dangerous if not carried out correctly. Starved bodies can collapse and experience heart failure when suddenly flooded with nutrients due to their inability to handle the rapid change. As none of the doctors had encountered such a malnourished patient, especially one as young as Michelle, they sought assistance from colleagues who had experience in safely reintroducing nutrients to malnourished patients through their work with Doctors Without Borders. Fortunately, with the guidance they received, the treatment was indeed successful. Michelle slowly regained stability, and her life was no longer in immediate danger. She remained in the hospital for some time, during which she thrived and grew with the help of the properly balanced diet provided by the doctors. In just 3 weeks, she had gained 24% of her original weight, a remarkable improvement compared to the expected 10% weight gain of her illness had slowly been a result of the stomach flu. In just 3 weeks, she gained 24% of her original weight, which was a remarkable improvement compared to what was initially expected. During her hospital stay, it was discovered that Michelle had an old fracture on her jawbone. However, it was impossible to determine how the injury occurred or the amount of force required in order to inflict it. Both Carol and Rob, the doctors who treated Michelle, reported her parents, Henry and Jessica, to social services. They believed that as Michelle's parents, Henry and Jessica should have recognized their daughter's severe malnourishment and imminent danger. Henry and Jessica were subsequently arrested and charged with grievous bodily harm. Another revelation that came to light during Michelle's hospitalization was the complete absence of any official records of her existence. Her parents had never been in contact with child welfare authorities during Jessica's pregnancy and chose to have Michelle at home. Furthermore, they did not register Michelle's birth, meaning she was not assigned a personal number or recognized as even a Swedish citizen. This act was indeed illegal, but Henry and Jessica claimed that they did not want Michelle to be a part of a system or labeled as a Swedish citizen. Instead, they wanted her to be a citizen of the world. Their beliefs aligned with Breatharianism, with Jessica even practicing the belief for a period of time. Shortly after the hospital visit, due to the actions of the doctors, both Henry and Michelle were indeed arrested. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering what led up to this point. Well, let me tell you. The couple met in 2012. Jessica found herself in Australia facing complications from an abortion. The doctors delivered heartbreaking news: Jessica may never be able to have children in the future. Determined to find solace, Jessica decided to embark on a journey around the world. In 2014, she met Henry, a Swedish man living in England at the time. Their connection deepened and they fell madly in love. Henry held strong beliefs in alternative medicine, harboring skepticism towards modern Western medicine despite lacking any medical education himself. When Jessica shared her doctor's prognosis, Henry strongly disagreed, claiming that doctors were wrong. According to him, Jessica could conceive again if she can eliminate all toxins that interfered with the immune system's cellular regeneration. Henry proposed a placebo method based on faith. This would mean Jessica had to truly believe she can get pregnant again, which would regenerate her body's cells and allow her to conceive. Between 2014 and 2016, Jessica and Henry made significant lifestyle changes to cleanse her body of all toxins. Jessica embarked on 3 separate 7-day fasts, surviving solely on water. To complete the process, she began breatharian, sustaining herself on air and sunlight for another 7 days. After the 7-day period ended, she continued to consume only water for an additional 22 days. Jessica even documented her 7-day fast on her YouTube channel, sharing her experience with the world. Henry strongly believed in alternative approaches to medicine and was skeptical of Western medical practices. He closely monitored Jessica during the 7-day dry fast, amazed that she can go without water for that long. This only reinforced his doubts about the Western medical system. In 2016, Jessica became pregnant, and the couple decided to move to Sweden before the baby's arrival. They chose not to go for any health checkups, relying on their beliefs that natural birth was the only way to go. They had heard stories of babies being born after more than 9 months of pregnancy and believed that the traditional 9-month time frame was arbitrary. Jessica, too, was confident in her decision because she had read books and websites about natural, unassisted home births where women emphasized that babies came when they were ready. She even mentioned cases of babies in Asian countries being in the womb for up to 12 to 18 months. With this knowledge, they patiently waited for their baby Michelle to be born. When Jessica went into labor, Henry was right beside her, armed with the knowledge he had gained from his readings. They believed that they didn't need a professional midwife present as long as Henry had read about it in a book. This decision was partly influenced by Henry's traumatic experience during the birth of his previous child in a hospital, where he felt ignored and pushed aside by the staff. The labor lasted 48 hours, and finally, Michelle was born. Henry decided not to cut the umbilical cord immediately, as he had learned that the placenta continues to provide essential nutrients and boosts the baby's immune system for up to 48 hours after the birth. And so, the couple welcomed their baby girl into the world confident in their alternative approach to childbirth and the belief that natural methods were the best for their family. Jessica firmly believed in the idea that humans didn't need food to survive. However, after giving birth to her daughter Michelle, she realized that she needed to make an exception since she was breastfeeding. This posed a problem for Jessica as her strict beliefs conflicted with what she needed to nourish her baby. At around 2 months old, Michelle began developing small red dots over her body, which eventually spread to her face and other areas, growing to the size of fists. Concerned, Jessica and her partner Henry acknowledged the seriousness of the situation. Instead of seeking medical help, Henry took it upon himself to investigate the cause of Michelle's rashes. He hypothesized that it could be a food allergy and decided to eliminate one product at a time from Michelle's already limited diet. Jessica, on the other hand, wanted to eliminate all potential allergens at once and survive solely on the bare essentials. According to Henry, Michelle's eczema started to disappear almost immediately. Encouraged by this apparent improvement, Jessica persisted with her strict diet for a few more months before they slowly reintroduced basic foods to identify the specific allergen. Eventually, they concluded that Michelle had an intolerance to salicylates, which are naturally found in plants and also present in medicines like aspirin. Since Henry and Jessica followed a vegan lifestyle, with Jessica occasionally going breatharian, they suspected that the salicylates in their diet might be the root cause. However, they discovered that the salicylate levels were much lower in fresh and unripe fruits compared to the overripe ones, such as brown bananas. Consequently, they decided to exclusively feed Michelle with unripe fruits and vegetables. They believed that they had successfully identified and resolved the cause of Michelle's eczema, so they never took her to the doctor. The couple decided to leave Sweden to move to Indonesia, Jessica's home country. They had plans to live together in Jessica's family's house. In 2019, they started preparing for the move. However, prior to the departure, they made a decision to put their daughter Michelle on a strict travel diet for 2 to 3 weeks. This meant that Michelle would not be receiving enough nutrients, but they believed it would only be temporary and that she would be fine afterwards. During the 2 weeks of the diet, Henry's parents visited them after their holiday in Germany. Unfortunately, they had contracted a stomach flu unknowingly and passed it on to Henry, Jessica, and Michelle. The whole family became seriously ill and couldn't keep any food or fluids down. Michelle vomited frequently and her body began to shrink as she rapidly lost weight. Henry and Jessica were very concerned for her daughter's well-being and wanted to help her as soon as possible. She continued to vomit throughout the day and drink a lot of water, as well as being breastfed. Due to Michelle vomiting and being sick for extended periods of time, this is how we ended up back at the beginning of this story. Once the couple were arrested and taken to trial, Henry mentioned multiple instances of what he thought was appropriate during the trial. He considered himself to be quite knowledgeable about assessing his daughter's health. He believed that in using methods used by the ancient Greeks, he was able to use their techniques to determine a person's physical condition. According to Henry, after checking on his daughter Michelle, Henry concluded that she didn't show any signs of serious dehydration. However, he himself was feeling unwell. Shortly after, he passed out, and when he regained consciousness hours later, he realized that Michelle's condition had worsened. Henry then began his own physical examinations of his daughter and realized that she was truly sick. Henry claimed that he was capable of administering an IV to hydrate Michelle himself, but since he only had an adult-sized needle at home, he decided it was time to go to the hospital. However, he didn't want to call an ambulance, fearing it would burden the healthcare system unnecessarily. Instead, he called his mother, who picked them up and drove them to the emergency room. During the trial, Henry mentions being aware of Michelle's critical condition and chose not to use a normal entrance to the hospital. He didn't want to go through the hassle of answering questions before seeing a doctor. Instead, he went through the entrance used by paramedics. Unfortunately, a nurse stopped him and informed him that he had to go back and use the correct entrance. Henry also was very adamant that he was appalled by the treatment he received and insisted that his daughter was dying. However, it was clear that the nurse was simply following the proper procedure. During the cross-examination, Henry also states once Michelle was in the hospital treatment room surrounded by medical staff, the focus was then placed on them. It was mentioned that Henry quickly became angry when he noticed a change in attitudes of the nurses and doctors towards him and his family. He overheard them whispering about the treatments and examinations they were carrying out on Michelle, which made him feel invisible. Henry demanded to be informed about the procedures and their purpose. After Michelle had returned from the X-ray department, Henry and his wife, Jessica, were informed about their daughter and had undergone a lumbago acupuncture procedure where thin needles were inserted into her lower back to improve blood flow. This angered Henry even further, as he believed that his daughter was not in serious danger if such a procedure was being performed without anesthesia. The hospital staff then called for a meeting with Henry and Jessica to inform them about Michelle's severe malnourishment, which had brought her close to death. There were also accounts of Henry continuing to argue with the doctors and eventually ended the discussion. Shortly after, both the police and social services arrived at the hospital, informing the couple that their daughter would be taken from them for their own protection. Shortly after, both the police and social services arrived at the hospital, informing the couple that their daughter would be taken from them for their own protection. This devastating news left Henry and Jessica feeling punished for their beliefs in alternative lifestyles and skepticism towards Western medicine. Henry and Jessica's negligence toward her daughter, Michelle's health, was deeply concerning. Despite knowing Michelle's vitamin levels were dangerously low, they failed to take action to address the issue. They didn't bother buying food or vitamin supplements for her, and they continued with a strict travel diet that they had imposed on her. Even when asked about Michelle's old fractures, Henry and Jessica came up with feeble excuses. Henry suggested that Michelle's jaw fracture may have occurred during Jessica's long labor, even though Michelle never showed any signs of pain at birth. As for the old injury on Michelle's head, Henry claimed that she must have accidentally bumped her head on the doorframe when she was around 10 months old. They both agreed that the injury didn't require medical attention, as Michelle didn't display any signs of pain. On May 23, 2019, both Henry and Jessica were sentenced to 3 months in prison for grievous bodily harm of a child. However, on appeal, the sentence was reduced to probation, so neither Henry or Jessica spent any time in prison for their actions. During and after the trial, Michelle was living in a foster home and, according to her foster mother, was doing very well. Despite her progress, based on some unconfirmed sources, Henry and Jessica have allegedly since regained custody of their daughter. And for the sake of privacy reasons, the names mentioned in this story are not real, but the events that have taken place are very much so based in reality.
Okay, so I have a lot of things I want to talk about this story, because I think there's like interesting elements here that I want to discuss. So this lifestyle that they're having, which seemed to be a vegetarian, vegan / breatharian lifestyle.
I mean, just for clarification, like the vegetarian vegan part was like just what they chose to do when they weren't actively practicing the dietary parts of breatharian, because dietary part is just strictly not eating at all. But that's, I guess it was on and off for them.
Because I wanted to like just clarify that it seemed like the breatharian lifestyle is fasting for days with only water to like cleanse toxicity, as if I understood it. But they said it in a more spiritual way, it seemed like, about the breathing air and sun and stuff. But I wanted to talk about how both the father and the mother used to or had some type of trauma, and they decided to do this lifestyle to deal with that, like as a spiritual healing kind of process. And that in itself, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good to like have other people have, so like they do their healing process through traumas for different ways. Some people go to therapy, some people do spiritual journeys in that way, and that in itself is not bad. What I think is bad is when you go like super extreme to the point that somebody's gonna die. That I think is like a little bit scary in a way. And I'm not bashing like specifically this lifestyle in itself. I mean like lifestyle in general. Like it could be any other type of beliefs or religious belief or whatever beliefs you have. If you go super extreme, it's never going to be good. Like a good balance is a good balance. So in this way, the trauma that they had was kind of feeding them into going into this like spiritual journey. Great, lovely, go for it. And then they started doing all these like fasting and the spiritual journey basically. And then they got Michelle, the child was born, and doing a natural birth is also nothing wrong with it. They were reading up and trying to be knowledgeable about it and then do their thing. And there's a lot of people who does that as well. If you as a mother or a parent don't want to do that, that's fine. You can go to hospital as well. Like either way, if you know what you're doing, if you have people who know what you're like, then it's okay. Because like people been doing that for years before that. And they were kind of basing their idea, like this spiritual belief that they had, the Breatharian beliefs, was based on Greece, kind of like old Greece kind of knowledge, I would say. And like there's pros and cons with using like old knowledge, is that they didn't really have everything to work with. Science is evolving with time, and something that might have worked back then or something that was working because of what they had back then is not going to be an issue, or might not even be an issue today. It's something that could be an easily thing to handle or deal with today. So
I think as well what makes this even more interesting is that a lot of this situation was based in trauma in itself. I don't even think it's had anything to do with the research or anything related to
everything was feeding from the trauma, and just trying to be as natural as possible, basically.
Exactly, because they were so afraid that the medical system, which, let's be truthful here, even though some countries' medical systems are better than others, there has been records of, doctors not doing the job they're supposed to do properly. Nurses, we've covered a couple nurses on this podcast who were killing people because of their own personal beliefs. So we know that there's actual records of, people who are not doing what they were supposed to be doing as medical professionals. We know that's a reality that we live in. And I think whatever trauma they both experienced, her Jessica having experienced the
abortion
issues, and then Henry having to deal with his other child that he had previously, whatever issues he had going on. I think the fact that they both were technically, the lack of a better term, they were trauma bonded because they had a very similar experience. And then now that he had this belief thinking that they can overcome it. And then once a coincidence happened when she was able to get pregnant, despite her prognosis from the previous doctor, it only reinforced that trauma, because now it kind of gave them something like, you see, it does work, even though, like, I'm not saying, like, maybe it did help her get rid of toxins, because fasting is good within reason, and maybe that did help her. But I think because they were dealing with trauma, it sent it to a very extreme level.
Exactly. There's also what I wanted to point out, like, before as well, that going extreme is never good in any way. It does not matter, like, what type of beliefs or lifestyle you're choosing. If you have the right balance and if you do it the correct way, it's not going to be, like, fatal in that sense. And I think a good balance is always a good thing for your body, mind, and soul in general. But it is quite sad that the trauma was kind of making them go towards, because they were like, this is working. And then they just went slowly towards a very extreme way, to the point that when they got Michelle, they were already in that extreme kind of mentality. So Michelle just was being born, didn't know any better, right? She just... I think they said, like, it wasn't Michelle also fasting after a couple of months, 11 months? No, wait,
yeah,
when
like,
was
even
it?
after, it was like, I think around like 9 to like 11 months after being born, that she was already, they were forcing the baby to, like, essentially fast, because they felt, because the baby's reliant on the mother still, breastfeeding,
which I thought was very interesting, because, like, the mom was, like, going towards a direction where it's like, but I need to breastfeed.
Yeah, like, she acknowledged,
but,
like, she had to, but then at the same time, it's like, you still would restrain yourself from feeding the baby.
But that was only because the baby got eczema, and eczema is it's very common for newborn babies to get that. It's not like uncommon.
But it wasn't just the eczema either. It was just, I think, the symptoms that came with it. They assumed it was
I felt like they just
eczema.
wanted to fix it. I felt like they always wanted to fix every little issue the baby had, and then they just tried a bunch of things and, like, okay, it seems like the fasting thing is working. But what they hadn't realized was, like, if you, like, are... Wait, how did she do when she was pregnant? Did she eat anything? It wasn't specified, right? Because, like, she had to eat something.
Yeah, they didn't really specify how she did during the pregnancy, only how she did before getting pregnant, leading up to it. So I would assume naturally
she must have eaten
something, because I'm like, you need to eat, because then the baby's going to start siphoning nutrients from your body.
Yeah.
And already, when you're pregnant, the baby is taking nutrients from your body naturally, and that's why you need to take prenatal vitamins and eat way more, because you need more nutrients to sustain 2 lives. But I'm assuming she obviously did that because the baby did end up being born. So, but yeah, it seems like they were just already in the red. But I do have a question, I guess, for you as well, but the audience, that they can probably, something to think about. But I guess since we're talking, obviously you can answer. Do you think, like, they should have been punished more harshly?
Oh, yeah.
Due to what they believed in, like, truly believed in? Or do you feel like, okay, they shouldn't, because that's their personal beliefs, and just like any first world country, you're allowed to have your beliefs?
I think that they should have been more punished, because their beliefs ended up making their child very, very malnourished and sick. And even though the doctors told them that, hey, warning, red flags, your baby's malnourished, and you guys haven't even went to any visits, and I get that it's their beliefs, but, like, even though this is what happened in Sweden. So even though in Sweden you don't have to go to the BBC visits, you still they have to report that if you decide not to. so that because as it was stated in the story, because it's the child's right to have proper health care, and that is the reason it's done in Sweden. Is because the government has they have to make sure that the child has the health care that they have the right to. So like, even though they skip that, that's the parents' choice, because there's a lot of parents who does that. They don't trust as we stated before, the medical field in any way. So there are parents who do that. But even though they still didn't go there, they got the information from the medical field that, hey, or the medical, the doctors and everybody who was there, who said that, hey, your kid is like super low on iron, which is super important to have. Most of the vitamins that, like, it was so many vitamins. I'm like, these, like, all of these things. And the father still was like, no, I don't believe that. That, to me, that is the scary part. But like, that has nothing to do with the belief in itself. You can have a belief, you can have all that as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. But in this case, Michelle could have died if they didn't do anything about it. If the father didn't go, Michelle could have died, you know? And I think that in itself, even though they didn't mean it, even though they tried to do it like based on the child, like they based everything on they tried to be a good parents. They tried to do what they believed in, but it was just way too extreme. Just because they thought it was good doesn't mean that it is actually good. And they didn't really get the wake-up call when the doctor said stuff to them like, this is not good for your child. So I feel like they still have a responsibility because it's their child, and 3 months is not enough for that. And they still was very, very determined that, no, we were not wrong. We were basing on our beliefs. Like, they were giving excuses, even though the child was... Like, to me, that's just weird to have that logic, giving excuses that you were following your beliefs, but your child is almost dying. Like, to me, that's a very weird, dissociate kind of thing there.
I think, you know, instead of it being like 3 months solely of like punishment, I think they probably should have got some therapy, because they also didn't specify if they did or not. I'm assuming they didn't. I think they needed therapy because, like we mentioned before, I think the belief began to mold and shape and evolve with their trauma, and became synonymous with each other because they both had went through a traumatic event related to childbirth. So I think they definitely needed to find out that, you know, there's nothing wrong with their beliefs in itself as long as it's done like we said before, within reason. But I think the problem really arose was the fact that they were so afraid of doing anything within the system, because even though the system is not perfect, one thing I think the system at least is decent at is notifying people when something is wrong. At the very least, there's an identifier for that. Like, your child should be a certain size, a certain weight. They should have a certain amount of iron in their blood. They should have a certain amount of vitamins in their blood. If their bone density is low, if they, you know, like basically all that stuff. So I think to some level, they needed more therapy to understand that they were more hurt than it really was about the belief. I truly think the belief just gave them an excuse in their head, like in their, you know, psyche, pretty much.
I think so too, actually. Because what was really striking to me was that when Michelle got really sick and they thought it was a stomach flu, right? And they were like, yeah, let's just get IV and stuff, right? I don't even know how they could do that. Where did they even get IV? Either way, that's beside the point.
That was weird. I'm like, why do you have IV needles?
Where do you even get that? Okay, either way, his mentality was like, she's getting sick. I don't have a needle for a baby, even though I know how to do this. But she's getting sick. Let's go to the hospital. So in his brain, even though he had his beliefs, he still, as a last resort, went to the doctors to get help. And in my brain, it just feels like somewhere deep inside, he knew that, like, certain things you can't really do naturally. So I just find that interesting how he was like, he had his beliefs, but then he knew deep inside that I should go to the hospital to get this help. But on the other hand, I get that he went there. He's like, my baby is sick, and like they kind of like disregarding him in the beginning, and then he had to wait and stuff to get help. And I know that like some hospitals and like the staff, they can be rude if that, like, I guess the rudest might be like a little, how do you say it? They are very understaffed and stressed, and then they can't really help and deal with everybody. So they come off as very like distant in many ways, which that can come off as rude to many people. And sometimes even because of this understaffed, stressed environment, you can also do malpractice because of it. And that have happened also a lot as well. You know, this happens because like we're all humans, but the knowledge that like doctors and nurses and everybody in the field has is still based from years of medical like research and everything. And going the breatharian lifestyle, or I guess Jessica and Henry's lifestyle of basing things from like really old like methods that have been developed since then, I think that's like the reason it's old is because we have made it better with science.
Yeah, we've learned, we've adapted, technology has allowed us to be better. And make sure that complication's not going to happen. What if there would have been a complication, right? Like we never they would just had a not miscarriage, but they would have like Michelle would have died on the spot, you know? Yeah, but
anything like that could happen, you know?
But because of that trauma, I know for a fact, you know, just to kind of start to gradually like wrap it up a little bit, is that I know for a fact that trauma that they were both experiencing, even if something were to happen because of Michelle dying, let's say if like she would have died, like I think they still would have found a way to blame the system somehow, even though like the baby was not in the system. They didn't register the baby didn't have any kind of social security, you know, like Sweden's version of a social security number. Like they didn't do anything for the baby on the record. But I know for a fact if that scenario would have played out, they would have found a way to, you know, like, hey, it's not our fault, we did everything we were supposed to, and then they would have found an excuse, which like I mentioned seems more like a mental health issue, because it's kind of like what you said, it's a little dissociative, but instead of it being like with evil intentions, it's based on trauma. It's a trauma response, looking to blame something for things that they can't control. And then sometimes as well, you know, that it evolves to such a level that unintentionally they're creating the problem that they're trying to run away from. So
in
that's
summary,
what makes it kind of trippy.
Like, feed your children. Historically, we all know kids need food, okay?
Food is life.
And we're not going to bash on any beliefs or lifestyle choices. You can be whatever you want to as long as you take care of your body and make sure that, you know, you're not going to die, or your spouse is not going to die. That's like the bare minimum. And then you can do whatever you want to. You don't have to believe in the medical field. You don't have to believe in your own thing, but just make sure that nobody dies. That's all. No, not going to die and suffer. That's the bare minimum.
Facts.
And also, it's also, if you're uncertain, consult with a doctor or specialist in the field if you're uncertain about things.
Yes. Let's end it on a good note. You already know the vibes if you've been on the show before. You know, we end every episode with some food to, you know, offset the negativity. So, what do you think we should do today? What kind of vibes are you feeling?
I feel like drinks.
What kind of drinks?
I like boba tea. But then I realized that when you say drinks in English, you mean like alcohol. So I guess, I don't know. What do you feel? You can start.
If you want to do boba tea, that's fine. That's okay. If you want to do boba tea.
I want to do boba tea. So like the basic, like super basic black milk boba tea thing.
I was going to say something. I'm a little sick, just a smidge. So I'm going to go with some nice black tea with lemon, some nice honey, something basic.
Let's be basic today.
It's just something simple. We don't have to be extra, just simple. No, that's what the kind of vibe I'm on right now. You know, nice. It's getting a little colder out, so nice little warm vibes. Just nice and cuddly, and that's kind of the kind of time that I'm on right now. So that's what I'm feeling. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to check out all the other episodes, as well as check out the YouTube. We'll upload these audio segments on YouTube as well. So that way, obviously you can check them out on YouTube. I think the audio is a little bit better on YouTube, the compression's a little different, but also it's mainly so that way when we do live streams and stuff like that, you're able to go to a platform and see it and kind of interact with us and all that jazz. So I hope you have a lovely day. I hope you enjoyed the story, and we shall see you guys next week. Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.